Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to attend this webcast. My goal here today is to just work through what the Disciplined Agile framework is all about, and to share with you some existing material and some new materials as well that you more than likely haven't seen before. I'm hoping that I always like to warn people we're going to cover a lot of ground. And I hopefully want you to get you thinking outside of the box, because there are some very interesting ideas here that reflect the realities of enterprise class agile development. So I will take questions at the end. So please put them into the chat window, and then we will and then Shrikant will will manage that for me. Okay. So what I would like to do. Excuse me. As you can tell, I've got a bit of a cold that came on about a day ago, and stuff happens, I guess. So anyways, I want to walk through some of the fundamentals of the Disciplined Agile framework, and in particular, work through the 4 levels or the 4 scopes that we support, all the way from Agile delivery, Agile software development, all the way up to the actual Disciplined Agile enterprise. So anyways, let's get started. I always like to start with this metaphor, what I call the racing car metaphor. And what we've been seeing since 2001, when the Agile movement first kicked off, was that software development teams got very good at building racing car engines. We got very good at building Agile software development teams, and we're good at tuning them, getting better productivity, getting better mileage, making them faster. We're really good at that. We can build these wonderful race car engines, but in many cases, we take this racing car engine and we put it into our organizational tractor. So we've got these great software development teams, but then we're surrounded by ineffective governance, ineffective data management. Our operations might not be that good. Our approaches to funding and budgeting might not be that effective. So we've got a really serious problem. So if we want to win the race, what we really need is a racing car. And so we need to put our awesome race car engines into a racing car. But of course, having just a race car isn't sufficient. We also need an effective team to race the car, because frankly, anybody can go and buy a race car. That's not a big deal. But if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't have a good race car driver and a good pit crew that can fill it up and swap tires in and out in a couple seconds, then you have no hope of ever winning the race. And then, of course, finally, even having a great race car and a great race car team still isn't going to get the job done. We need an environment. We need something that can enable us to make money and to serve our customers. In this case, to entertain our customers. So we need this overall environment, this overall organization that enables us to support racing. So why am I telling this story? So here's the metaphor. So Disciplined Agile delivery basically works through how do we make these effective racing car engines? How do we make these effective delivery teams? And as you'll see, we look at Agile software development and more appropriately, solution delivery from beginning to end. And we look at the entire picture. How does this all fit together? Of course, that's just a start. What we really need is DevOps. We really need a good racing car that enables us to go fast. But of course, the racing car, just like the racing car wasn't sufficient, neither is DevOps. So what we really need is an IT organization that's also effective. So we could be doing DevOps, but if the rest of IT is still slow and ineffective, then we're not really getting the job done. So, and then of course, finally, what we really need is an organization that can leverage the IT department to be successful in the marketplace, to have effective value streams where we go to market and we provide services and products for our customers, and we make money as an organization, and then that's how we survive. That's how we thrive. So in the Disciplined Agile framework, we look at all 4 levels. Now, we originally started years ago focusing on DAD, on Disciplined Agile delivery. But in recent years, we've continued to expand. We've continued to grow the framework in order to address the overall organizational picture, or the business agility picture, if you will. So what does that look like? So anyway, so why should you be important? What's important here? Why should you be interested in Disciplined Agile, in the Disciplined Agile framework? Well, a few observations. So first of all, every person, every team, every organization is unique. And that means one size does not fit all. One process size does not fit all. And what we need to do is we need flexibility, and we need to have options. And as we'll see later, that Disciplined Agile is all about providing options and into giving you choices and walking you through what these choices are. Our organizations are complex adaptive systems, and what that means is that we're this collection of teams, and we interact with each other, and these teams are learning, they're evolving as they go, they're changing their behaviors over time, and that affects each other. Each team affects each other, and we have to work together in order to succeed. So what happens is, so how does that all fit together? So going back to the racing car analogy, what if your team is building a racing car engine, but another team thinks that you're building a boat? And another team thinks you're building a tank, and another team thinks you're building a tractor. So if all these teams sort of go off and do their own thing, each team, your team will build a great racing car engine. Another team will build a great boat body. Another team will build a great tank body, and so on, or tank treads. But then when you go to put it all together, it doesn't actually fit. And this is the challenge that we see right now in most, particularly with IT departments around the world, is that we have these disparate bodies of knowledge. We have these different visions for what we need to do and how we need to succeed, and they don't fit together. So the PMI vision of project management doesn't really fit well with Agile. The TOGAF vision of architecture doesn't really fit well with Agile. They spin a story, but it's not really true. And I think any organization is trying to do Agile and TOGAF and PMI and COBIT and ITIL and trying to patch all these things together. It's just not working out for them, and you get these politics going on, and these different visions, and people don't agree with each other, and everybody's got their own vision. It's a mess. So we need something. And so the Disciplined Agile framework fixes that problem. We have this other issue that software development and IT in general is complex. If you look at the Cynefin framework, it's very obvious from Cynefin that IT is the things that we do fit into the complex quadrant. So and the only way you can succeed in these complex environments is to have choices and to tailor your approach, tailor your structure, tailor the way that you work to address the situation that you find yourself in. So once again, you need choices, and this is Disciplined Agile is all about choices, and that can be a bit overwhelming. It's like going to the market, going to the grocery store, and your wife has asked you to pick up some fruit or some vegetables, and she hasn't told you what she wants. Or you get there, and there's 30 different choices. Sometimes my wife asks me to pick up apples, and when I go to the fruit market near my house, there's 20 different types of apples. So what the heck does she want, right? So it's hard sometimes to have choices. It's great to have choices, but it can be frustrating as well. And just because you're unique, it doesn't mean you need to discover everything from scratch. A very common problem that I see, particularly with a lot of coaches, a lot of so-called Agile coaches, is they want to build a customer to learn. And there's very little understanding that other organizations, other people have whatever problem you face right now, whatever challenge you face, other people have solved it already years ago, sometimes decades ago. So you don't need to suffer through that learning curve again. You can leverage the learnings of other people. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel all the time. So Disciplined Agile helps to make these choices, makes the choices clear, and even lets you know you've got choices. Some methodologies, particularly more prescriptive ones like Scrum, don't give you choices. They tell a good story about how they can be tailored, but then there's only one official way of doing things. So that, and it's a good way if that meets the needs of your situation, but it might be a phenomenally bad way if it doesn't. So you need to make choices. You need to understand. You need to understand what your situation is and make good choices for you, which means you need to know what your options are, and you need to know what the trade-offs are that you're making. And then finally, successful improvement efforts focus on people, process, and tooling. One of the things that I've been seeing in the industry lately, and it's mostly a healthy trend, although it has its side effects, is there's been one heck of a focus on being agile and on the agile mindset, on the culture and all this sort of stuff. And that's without a doubt is important. But if you don't know what you're doing, I don't care what your mindset is. It doesn't matter, right? So yeah, you're holding having a big group hug every day, but if you don't have a clue what you're doing, it doesn't really matter. if you don't have the tools to support you, it doesn't really matter. So we need to be looking at all three of these issues, not just one. So we need to have a more holistic view of what we're trying to achieve when we're doing these transformations, when we're doing these continuous improvement efforts. And process is an important part of it. So, obviously, the people culture stuff is more important, but the process stuff is also important, as is the tooling. Remember, the first value of Agile is individuals and interactions over processes and tools, but all of those things are important. It's just the stuff on the left is more important than the stuff on the right. So let's not forget the stuff on the right. So the principles, some of the driving principles of Disciplined Agile. This slide we have not published yet, so you will be the first group of people who publicly see this outside of the Disciplined Agile Consortium. So congratulations, I guess. But anyway, so Disciplined Agile, the framework, is based on 7 fundamental principles. The first one, excuse me, is to delight our customers, not just produce potentially shippable software, not just to work with our customers or be customer friendly, but to actually delight our customers. We want to exceed their needs, we want to exceed their expectations, and make them happy. This is the way you gain new customers. This is the way you keep your customers, and it's all about serving our customers and to truly delight them in the products and services that we as an organization offer them. We want to be awesome. This is an idea that we've adopted from the Modern Agile movement. Josh Krewski is doing a great job with Modern Agile. It's funny, the tagline for my company, Scott Ambler and Associates, is we help make organizations awesome. So we've been talking about this awesome stuff for many years, but Josh has really popularized this as an idea. So we've adopted this idea outright. Being pragmatic. We don't need to be pure. I think there's a challenge in the Agile movement that too many people focus on being pure Agile. We're going to do everything by the book. No, we need to do what's right for the situation that we find ourselves in. We need to be as agile as we can be given our situation, not be a pure, not be a purist. So we need to be really a little bit smarter about the way we approach Agile. Context counts. You need to do what's right for the situation you find yourself in, and to adjust as your situation adjusts, then adjust your strategy. Having choices is good. One size does not fit all. I'm concerned about a lot of the other Agile, some of the Agile methods out there that tell you one way of doing things. Thou shalt have a release train. Well, yeah, that's nice. It's one way of doing things. It's not the best way. It's one way. It's a good way, but it's certainly not the best way. And we can do better. At least some people can do better. And we can do worse as well, of course. So, anyways, let's have options. Nothing wrong with having options, and frankly, it's probably a very good thing. We want to optimize flow. This is a fundamental lean concept. We want to make sure that we're effective at what we do, and we want to be constantly trying to improve, constantly learning, constantly experimenting. So all that good sort of stuff. And then finally, we want to be enterprise aware. This is something that we first started promoting in Disciplined Agile from the Disciplined Agile delivery from the very beginning. And the basic idea is that we should recognize that my team is only one of many teams in the organization, and we should do what's right for the organization, not just what's convenient for us. And I think a lot of the misunderstanding of Agile is around people who are, frankly, can be a bit lazy, and they do what's convenient for them, and they say, oh yeah, we're producing potentially shippable software, but it doesn't really fit in with what everybody else is doing, or you're reinventing the wheel, or it doesn't run on common platforms that's consistent with the rest of your organization. And what you're really doing is you might be getting something out the door really quickly, but you're also greatly increasing technical debt. And in the long run, you could be, you're making mistakes that, if you'd spent just a little more time thinking and were a little more mature in the way that you worked, you could have produced a much better longer term solution than just slapping something together. So we really need to be, so at the enterprise level, when we're working in these established organizations, we really need to be aware of our surroundings, and we want to leverage the rest of the organization. You can actually speed up by being enterprise aware, by leveraging existing work of other teams and collaborating effectively with them. So anyways, let's start with the engine. What does the engine look like? So Disciplined Agile Delivery was where we started. So in 2012, we released the first Disciplined Agile Delivery book, the cover of which is here. So Disciplined Agile Delivery started as a process decision framework, and actually Disciplined Agile is now the overall process decision framework. And it was based on some a few key characteristics. We've already hit on a few of them. Some of the ones we haven't hit yet. It's people oriented. It's people first, because it is individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So we've got to make our people successful and enable them to collaborate effectively and learn and work together. We take what we call a goal-driven approach. I'll walk through what that looks like in a minute. So this is how we give people choices. Is we basically say, hey, you need to think about these issues, and here are your choices, and here are your trade-offs. You choose intelligently. We also support a full delivery lifecycle. We'll work through what that means. We actually support multiple life cycles, because different teams and different situations will work in different ways. Disciplined Agile Delivery, Disciplined Agile in general, is empirical, and it's all based on how we observe, what we observe out there in the world. And it's phenomenally easy to observe when you go into an organization that there's some teams doing some sort of agile-ish Scrum thing, some teams doing some sort of a lean Kanban thing. So you might have some teams doing continuous delivery. You might have some teams doing lean startup, for example. And those are all good choices. They're all, in certain situations, one of those life cycles makes sense for you. So choose the right life cycle. So an enterprise class framework like Disciplined Agile has to support multiple life cycles, because different situations will need to do different things. And that's okay. We don't focus just on software. I think one of the challenges with Agile is that it talks too much to software in some cases. Software is obviously important, but it's really the overall solution. It's really the overall value stream that we're providing, not just the software. Software is a part of it, but so is the hardware. We might be changing the business processes around the usage of these systems. We might be changing the organization structure of the people using them. We're probably providing documentation and guides and stuff like that. So it's really about the overall solution, not just the software. So we need to look at the bigger picture. So DAD's a hybrid. We adopt ideas from a very wide range of sources. These are just a few of them, and we show how these techniques fit together. So each one of these methods, comprises sometimes dozens of techniques. But when do each of these practices? So when do they fit together? So when does it make sense to do look-ahead modeling? When does it make sense to do look-ahead architecture? When does it make sense to do test-driven development? When does it make sense to do regression testing? How do all these things fit together? To what extent should we do each of these things? Do things contradict each other as well? So, because there's one of the challenges with Agile, one of the great things about Agile is there's hundreds, if not thousands, of practices out there. But the challenge is that there's hundreds, if not thousands, of practices. How do they all fit together? That's a valid question. So we try to answer that question. So in many ways, Disciplined Agile is the glue that helps to fit all these things together, and still having options. We support a wide range of roles. I'm going to very quickly go through this. So we support a collection of primary roles. This is what we see on all teams. So team lead, for those of you familiar with Scrum, team lead is our version of Scrum Master. One of the things that we do is we don't limit ourselves to the terminology of Scrum. Because you don't have Scrum, you don't have a Scrum Master on a lean team, for example. So Scrum Masters are something that's particular to Scrum, which is fine. It's perfectly fine, but it's certainly not not as robust as you need. And we also adopt other roles. So, for example, we have an architecture owner on our teams, because Disciplined Agile, or at least Disciplined Agile Delivery, addresses architecture issues. We don't limit ourselves to just the management and collaboration stuff that you see in Scrum, but we go into technical things as well. And when you start going into technical issues, then sometimes you need more technical roles. One of which is architecture owner, our version of an Agile architect, adopted from Agile modeling. And their secondary roles, they typically appear at scale, and some of the other frameworks also have similar roles. So, for example, SAFe has a few of these roles, in particular integrator and independent tester. But we have domain experts or subject matter experts, because the product owner isn't going to know everything. They're not from the planet Krypton. They don't know everything there is to know. So sometimes you got to bring a subject matter expert in, or a domain expert, and get their advice and have them walk you through what they mean. Sometimes you bring technical experts in. Sometimes you have specialists. On a large program. So say you've got a program of 100 people, you probably have a program manager, a program coordinator, a specialist doing that role, and that's okay, right? So at scale, you will run into complexities that demand somebody being in a role. You'll have enterprise architects. Well, that's an example of a specialist role. You might have an operations engineer. That's an example of a specialist role. So there's very good reasons to have specialists sometimes. So let's make this explicit. We also support a full life cycle. This is a high-level version of the life cycle. One of the things that we do is we explicitly admit that there's phases, and this is, I appreciate, is an Agile swear word. But the reality is, if you get your head out of the Agile rhetoric for a minute and actually observe the way people work, particularly if you're still following a project mindset, then at some point somebody must have come up with this concept for this product or this thing that you're building. You had to do something to kick off. You had to do some sort of inception effort or project initiation effort or sprint zero effort, whatever you want to call that. You got to put the team together, for example, right? You got to get funding. You got to do some initial requirements. Hopefully you do a little bit of initial upfront architecture, do a little bit of planning to get going in the right direction. Then you do construction. And then eventually you do transition, you release into production. Now, yeah, sure, the DevOps teams, the teams that are more advanced, they've automated all this, and transition becomes a multi-minute or multi-hour activity. But the average Agile team spends about a month releasing their solutions into production. Obviously, significant room for improvement there. But the fact is that you do have these transition phases or release phases or release sprints or hardening sprints or whatever you want to call that. So, and obviously there's room for improvement there. And eventually you run things in production. Not exactly rocket science. So let's make this all explicit. 80% of Agile teams, by the way, are working on a new version of existing software. So as a result, they're getting change requests coming in from their end users at all points in time. So this is a new type of requirement, should be put in your work item stack or your product backlog or your work item pool, whatever you want to call that, be estimated, prioritized, and worked on accordingly. So let's make this stuff explicit. 80% of teams are doing this, so let's make it explicit. And if it just so happens you're working on the very first release of something, okay, fine. You're not getting any ideas coming in from production. Not a big deal. We support multiple life cycles. One of the life cycles we support is what we call the basic Agile life cycle. In this case, as you can see, is obviously based on Scrum. This is a good starting point for a lot of teams. We also support a lean or a Kanban type of a life cycle. Both these life cycles tend to be more along the lines of the project mindset. So you have a start and you have an end, and you may or may not go on to the next release. But for the most part, both the basic and the advanced or the lean life cycles tend to reflect the realities of projects. But if you keep your team together, if you have a long-lived team, over time your phases start to disappear. So inception, which is where you get your act together and you do initial planning and you do some initial requirements, initial architecture, all that sort of stuff. It just naturally disappears all by itself because if my team stays together and goes on to the next release, well, I don't need to put my team together anymore. We know what the architecture is. The scope is whatever we didn't get done in the previous release, and so on. So inception pretty much naturally disappears, and transition starts to disappear, through automation. So we start doing full automated regression test suites. We start doing continuous delivery where we automate the deployment of our software. So because the team is staying together, and because we know that a couple months from now, or a couple weeks from now, or even a couple days from now, we're gonna have to release again, we're highly motivated to do this, to improve our process, to make transition or this release stuff as easy and streamlined as possible. So then, over time, what happens is we evolve our process, we improve, we learn, and we end up in more of a continuous delivery mode where we do some construction and we release, do some construction and release, do some construction and release. And we have these very short, very short iterations, these very short time boxes, or just these very short, releases into production. So we end up with continuous delivery versions of the lifecycle as well. So here's the lean continuous delivery lifecycle. Basically, what's happened is yes, the team did inception, but it could have been years ago, and now we're just chugging along. Build some stuff, release it, build some stuff, release it, build some stuff, release it. We've also seen teams taking more of a scrumish approach to this as well. We've seen several teams now that they'll have a 1 week long iteration, a 1 week long sprint, and at the end of that sprint, they release every time, or pretty much every time. So every Friday afternoon, they release into production, and do some more work, release into production, more work, release into production, and yet they're still following more of a Scrum or an Agile life cycle than a Lean life cycle. So this is viable. And then finally, some teams follow an exploratory or a lean startup type of life cycle. So when you're exploring a new problem space, a new product space, then what happens is you will follow this exploratory life cycle based on lean startup, as opposed to one of the other types of life cycles. So different teams in different situations will make different life cycle choices. One size does not fit all. Choice is good. We also see teams improve over time. So what we're getting at with this chart here is that you might start with a traditional waterfall life cycle, or some sort of traditional life cycle at least. And almost always those teams, when you're first moving into the modern development world, you'll almost always go with an Agile Scrum-based life cycle. Sometimes you'll go straight to Lean, particularly if you're in a situation where new work is arriving often. Almost always because you're supporting something that's already up and running in production. So anyways, you'll tend to go to one of those Agile or Lean life cycles. But then over time, through process improvement, and particularly through keeping the team together, you'll see that these teams evolve into more of a continuous delivery type of a mindset. The Scrum Agile teams tend to move into the Agile continuous delivery Agile life cycle, and then eventually they evolve into the leaner life cycle. Not always, but almost always. And then the Kanban teams obviously just move into a lean continuous delivery mode as well. So over time, if the teams are allowed to stay together, and if they actually improve exactly, they do, they reflect, they do retrospectives, they choose to improve exactly as the Agile Manifesto says, then you'll see the life cycle evolving over time, and that's perfectly fine. Now, an implication for management is that some of your teams will be following one life cycle, one will be following other life cycles, or somewhere in between, of course. Different teams in different situations will work in different ways, and that's okay. So one of the ways that we enable choice in the Disciplined Agile framework, particularly when it comes to Disciplined Agile delivery, is we take what we call a process goal choice or a process capability choice. And so this is a mind map. The way that you read this is that, so during inception, we've got several process goals, like putting the team together and doing initial requirements, doing initial architecture, doing some initial risk identification, and so on. During construction, we regularly produce a potentially shippable solution. We address changing stakeholder needs. Hopefully, we're improving quality. The more effective teams improve the architecture early. During transition, we make sure we're ready to ship, and then we ship. And then ongoing through all this, I hope that we're growing our team members, we're training them, we're mentoring them, we're coaching them. We should be doing risk mitigation, of course. We should be coordinating activities both within the team and with other teams. But for all these things, so this is a very high-level diagram, of course. For all these things, you can do things different ways. So my team might put itself together in a much different manner than your team does. My team might do initial requirements in a much different way than yours does, and rightfully so. So different teams, different situations do different things. So at a high level, this is, for Disciplined Agile delivery, this is what we're talking about. Obviously, this isn't a lot of advice, right? I think this is all pretty blatantly obvious stuff. So let's drill down to the next level. So on this slide, I'm going to work through the notation that you're going to see on a couple of following slides. So a goal, so on the outside edge of that previous diagram, that mind map, there's 23 process goals. So the goals are represented as rounded rectangles. We have 3 of those 23 goals are listed there. Each goal has 2 or more decision points. So for example, when we're forming the initial team, we got to think through basic issues like where are these people coming from? How big is the team going to be? What level, what skills do they need? How dedicated to the team are they? How available are they going to be? Is the team distributed in any way? How complete is the team? So are we really putting together a whole team, or is it just a testing team, for example? So anyway, so that's the idea there. And then for each of these decision points, there's options. So for example, when it comes to excuse me, when it comes to geographic distribution, maybe the team's co-located, maybe it's partially dispersed. So you got a few people working from home. Maybe we've distributed sub-teams. So maybe we have a team working in Toronto, we have a team working in Bangalore, and we have a team working in Seattle, for example. Or maybe we're fully dispersed. So maybe we're just spread out all over the planet, and it is what it is. Or combinations thereof, of course. Now, what we do, we're not saying that we've identified all possible options. That's not possible, right? Because I'm sure new ideas are being created every single day. But what we are saying is that we give you a pretty darn good range of choices, and we certainly give you enough choices to let you know, hey, there's more than one way of doing things here. And in behind each of these choices, of course, and this is why the first book was 500 pages. Each choice has advantages and disadvantages. There's situations where it works well, and there's situations where it's a phenomenally bad idea. There's no such thing as the best practice. To make things easier, what we also do is we'll highlight some choices, and the highlighted choices are for teams that are reasonably near located, so you're at least on the same floor of a building. You are in a fairly straightforward situation, and you are a reasonably small team, so 10 people or less. So the default choices, these default options, the ones that are bolded, those are our suggestions for teams in that situation. If that's not your situation, then those options might not be for you. Even if that is your situation, some of those options, we've probably only got about 95% right, because there'll be a few things that are truly unique about your team, and some of the choices we suggest just don't make any sense for you, and that's okay. But at least we've done most of the choice thinking for you, and for the most part, it typically the choices are typically a combination of Scrum, extreme programming, agile modeling, and a little bit of unified process stuff in there to glue it all together. So, anyways, just to let you know. So, anyways, let's go through some examples here. So this is the goal. This is the goal diagram for forming the initial team. So as you can see, there's a lot of choices here. Oh, I should have also mentioned, whenever you see a list of options with an arrow beside it, so for example, when we look at the source, there's an arrow beside that list there. What that indicates is that the strategies towards the top of the list tend to be more effective in practice than the strategies towards the bottom of the list. So one of the things that we do in Disciplined Agile is we give a range. Often we give, it's in some ways like a maturity model, but we give a range of choices. And some of those choices really aren't that good. It might be the best you can do given your team and the situation that you find, but there are much better choices. So you should be aware of them and try to work your way up the hierarchy there at some point in time, and get as good as you can get as a team. Here's another example. This diagram is probably a little easier to read. The goal of securing funding. So early in a project, if you're still doing projects, you need to secure funding for it. And there's different ways we can fund projects. There's different ways we can manage the money. There's different ways that we can scope this out. So are we funding a team? Are we funding a project team, a long-lived team, or a value stream? So we're going to fund the entire effort to produce a service or a product for a customer, or are we just funding software development? So that's an important decision in some cases. During construction, how do we address changing stakeholder needs? And it's a little more than having a stack of index cards in some cases. But anyways, because there's different ways we can prioritize the work. There's different ways that we can accept change. There's different ways we can go about listening requirements. So different teams in different situations will make different choices, and rightfully so. This is our version of producing potentially shippable software, but because we're solution focused, not just software focused, we talk about consumable solutions. So consumable means desirable plus usable. This is what makes this is the way we delight our customers by producing something they actually want that's usable. And we look at the full solution. So this goal addresses things like, well, how do we go about programming? How do we go about evolutionary analysis and evolutionary design? How do we go about planning our efforts? How do we go about ensuring that what we're building is actually consumable? All critical things. So different teams will be in different situations. So the point of this diagram, this is the beginnings of a spider chart, is that depending on where you are on these six efforts, on these six scaling factors, you'll have more risk. So, for example, you will organize a team of 10 people much differently than a team of 250. You will organize a team. You will work in a different way when you're co-located in a single room, as opposed to being globally distributed around the planet. You will work in a different way when you're in a non-regulatory environment than if you're just addressing financial regulatory concerns, like say Sarbanes-Oxley, versus life-critical concerns, such as what we see in the automotive industry or in FDA with the Food and Drug Administration type regulations. You will work differently when you have a very complex domain as opposed to a very simple domain. So different teams, different situations will work in different ways. They will make different choices on those goal diagrams that I just showed, depending on the situation they face. And then as their situation changes, as they learn, they will also evolve the way that they work. So in Agile, we like to say a team should own its own process. We should be responsible as a team for figuring how we're going to work together and obviously doing the work. But how can you own your own process when you don't even know what's for sale? And that I think is the challenge with most Agile teams, is that most people are not process experts, and they don't realize that there's hundreds, if not thousands, of practices out there. So which practice is right for you? I don't know. It depends, right? It's in many ways, the Disciplined Agile is the it depends framework. It depends on the situation you find yourself in, on your skills and what you're going to do. So different teams make different choices. And governance, there's another Agile swear word for you. Governance is also built into DAD. You are being governed. Your executives, your senior managers are keeping an eye on things. They're asking basic questions like, are we spending our money wisely? Are we getting the quality we want? Are we getting value for our dollar? These are all important questions. Do we have good staff morale? Do we have good customer satisfaction? Are we actually delighting our customers? All important decisions that we should be making, things we should be monitoring, things we should be motivating our teams to achieve. So this governance stuff is built right into Disciplined Agile. We deserve to be governed. We are going to be governed, like it or not. So for all the rhetoric around governance, we are being governed. Just accept that. I believe you deserve to be governed effectively. I observe in many organizations that you are not being governed effectively, which is why so many people are bitter about it. Well, step up. Now is the time to step up and help senior management understand, here's how they can actually help, here's how they can contribute effectively. So anyways, governance is baked right in. So that's Disciplined Agile delivery in a very brief nutshell. Now let's talk about Disciplined DevOps. So Disciplined DevOps takes Disciplined Agile delivery and expands it into the operations space. And it's actually interesting, if you read the first book on Disciplined Agile delivery, which was published in 2012, it bakes DevOps stuff right in. We were actually the first Agile method that did that. So it was very, very interesting if you get a chance to go back and read that book. So the conventional view about DevOps looks like this. I'm sure you've seen this figure 8, infinite loop thing before, and this is a very good view, without a doubt. But it's missing a few things. So is it possible only for continuous delivery teams to do DevOps? Can't these Scrum teams also be doing DevOps? So we need to sort of up our game a bit, perhaps. What about security? So there's a very good movement around DevSecOps now, and rightfully so. Security is missing out of the original DevOps vision. What about the business? So similarly, there's a biz DevOps movement afoot. So we got so obviously DevOps is not the be all to end all. And what about data management? I'm sure all of you work for organizations that have a database or two kicking around, and wouldn't it be great to be able to have good quality data and be able to evolve those databases easily and safely and quickly? I don't think that's a lot to ask for. because all those techniques to do so exist, by the way. And what about explicit release management? So yeah, it's pretty easy. Like everybody loves to talk about DevOps, and oh yeah, we're just gonna put stuff into production many times a day. That's great for one team. What happens if you have 50 teams running in parallel? What happens if you have 500 teams? One of our customers has over 1,200 Disciplined Agile delivery teams in flight right now. Over 1,200 teams running in parallel. The last thing you want is 1,200 teams slamming stuff into production willy-nilly. Somebody's got to coordinate that. Now, it should be lightweight coordination, of course, but somebody's got to coordinate all that. Otherwise, these teams are going to step on each other's feet. They're going to blow each other out of the water, and that will kill your DevOps effort. So you got to be a little bit smarter in these large organizations, and that's okay. Even if you've only got a dozen teams putting stuff into production in parallel, you probably need to start coordinating that somehow. So we need to be a little more enterprise aware sometimes. So anyways. So this is our view of disciplined DevOps. So it goes beyond even though I love that diagram, the figure 8 diagram, or what he's going to call that, I love that. It's just not accurate, and I think it does us a disservice to use it, because DevOps is a lot more complicated than what that sort of diagram shows. Yeah, it's sexy and it's fun and looks really cool, but it really doesn't. It's not honest. It just isn't honest. So we need to do better. So anyways, this is a better, arguably maybe my graphic skills aren't quite there yet. And this is a work in progress diagram, by the way. We're having a professional graphic artist redo this one. So anyways, that's disciplined DevOps in a nutshell, looking at the bigger picture. But once again, that only gives us a racing car. What we really need is a team that can help us win the race with this racing car. So this diagram shows the workflow of the Agile IT department. So not only do we have this DevOps bubble, this light yellow pinkish thing going on, but in the greater blue bubble, we also have issues like, well, how do we approach enterprise architecture in an effective manner? How do we approach people management, HR, or talent management, what is going to call that, in an effective manner? How about continuous improvement? So how do we share process improvements across teams? If I've got 100 teams in flight, or 1,200 teams, does every single team need to figure out the tester on its own, figure out the tester and development's a good idea? Can we not be a little bit smarter about this and maybe have a few teams figure this out and then share their experience with others, and give everybody else a heads up and a better start at all this? So can we not have communities of practice and or guilds, if you want to use that terminology? We can be a lot smarter about this. So anyways, let's build this all in. Let's take the mystery out of how these things work together. How do we do reuse? How do we do portfolio management? In many ways, SAFE is all about a subset of this diagram, right? It's all about a combination of portfolio management, program management, and a few other things in the solution delivery bubble, and a couple things in the disciplined DevOps bubble. Doesn't cover the entire ground, but certainly covers some important things at the program and portfolio level. Which is a good start. How do we do governance across all this, across the IT department? As I said, I'm a firm believer that you deserve to be governed effectively. And then finally, what does the Disciplined Agile Enterprise look like? So this is where our new work is. We've got a new book coming out in a couple months, and you're going to start seeing stuff on the Disciplined Agile Delivery website probably later this month, if not certainly in July. New diagrams and good stuff like that. So what we're doing is that big IT diagram, that workflow diagram that I showed you a minute ago, we're expanding it to include important business efforts. Like, so how do we do finance? So how do we bring ideas like beyond budgeting into account, do more rolling wave budgets as opposed to these goofy annual budgets, which frankly really mess up IT? How do we streamline legal and procurement? I'm sure many of you work in situations where either you're working for a services company and you've got these very strange contracts coming at you every so often, or maybe you work for a customer company and you're procuring a services company and the contract just messes everything up for you. It pretty much puts you in a failure position almost at the very beginning of the effort. So anyway, so how do we do agile contracting, and how does that all fit in? How do we approach security? And we were talking about that earlier with DevSecOps. How do we approach marketing? So when you start looking at how do we implement these value streams, how do we do business operations, then we need to have this all working together effectively. So how do we so what does Formula One look like for our organization? So how do we provide an environment that we take our great racing car and our great racing car team, this awesome IT department, and leverage it to go to market and to solve, delight our customers and solve their needs and provide products and services for them. How does it all fit together? Because all it takes, I'm sure many of you are working in situations right now where you're working on a great team, and yet the way that project or that team is being funded completely messes you up, or that like I said, you've been shot in the foot by procurement almost from the very beginning. So if we're not looking at the bigger picture, and if we're not streamlining the entire thing, if we're not optimizing the flow across the organization, and not just within our software teams, not just within the engine, when you look at the bigger picture, then we're going to be in trouble if we don't. So this is what Disciplined Agile is all about. Let's look at the bigger picture. Let's ask, how does it all fit together? And let's make it as effective and streamlined as we possibly can. So just to wrap up here before I go to Q&A, so I see in the question window we've had a couple of questions, but now now that you've basically seen the entire message, maybe now's a good time to if you've got a question to certainly share it with us. Anyway, so what does it mean to be disciplined? The best definition that I've ever run into is it takes discipline to do the things that are good for you that you would rather not do. So it takes discipline to eat your veggies and not your chocolate cake every day for meals. And so for those of you, if you remember when you were a kid, I'm sure at some point in your childhood you had these fantasies of, oh, when I'm an adult, I'm going to eat ice cream for every single meal, or I'm going to eat whatever your favorite treat was. And then now as an adult, yes, you could eat ice cream every single meal, but that that's a phenomenally bad thing for you. And if you didn't get sick doing that, you certainly would gain serious weight, and then you would get sick. But that would be a bad thing. So we have the discipline to know, hey, you know what? At our meals, we need to eat our vegetables, and we need to drink juice and milk and water and all these good things, not just chocolate milk and syrup and ice cream and all these treat type things. So anyway, same thing at work, right? It takes discipline to accept the fact that we're going to be governed, and to work with the governance people to help them govern us. It takes discipline to do inception in a streamlined manner, to not let it go on forever, but also to actually do it. I see some teams, they just want to jump into coding, and then they get into serious trouble, and they don't know why. Well, you didn't think. You did no thinking up front. You just started going, and you had no idea where you're going. So, it was a mess. So anyways, we've got to be a little bit smarter about all this. One of the things that I'm going to invite all of you to do, just before we go to questions, is consider joining the DA community. So because you have attended a webinar, you can log into disciplinedagileconsortium.org and sign up and be what's called a Disciplined Agilist. It's sort of like a participation ribbon in many ways. In many ways, it's our version of certified Scrum Master. You don't have to do almost nothing to earn it. But it's a good start at other certifications they actually have to earn. And probably more importantly, it gives you access to member-only content. So some of the diagrams that I've been showing, well, now it's, I guess, no longer member-only because I've been showing it, but members saw some of these diagrams a couple months ago, and we've been getting feedback and all that sort of stuff, which is why we share them. But anyways, you get access to stuff that only members get access to. So it's pretty good. So anyways, consider that. So thank you very much. Let's go to questions. Excuse me again. So Shrukant's going to feed me questions, I guess. Okay, so from Michael Biederman, I hope I pronounced that right. Doesn't too much pragmatism make Agile mean anything to anyone? Well, yeah, that's why there's 7 principles and not just one, right? So you need to focus on delighting your customers and on on optimizing the flow and all those good sorts of things. So yeah, you've got to, and really, in many ways, this might be heresy, but the goal shouldn't be to be agile. The goal should be to let's improve. Let's always be learning. Let's always be getting better. Let's serve our customers more effectively. Now, I think obviously that being more agile and more lean is going to get you a lot further to those goals than anything else. But certainly, I don't think that the number one purpose is to be agile. I think it's to be to serve our customers better. How do you prevent people from being stuck in the concept phase? That requires discipline. Very often you need somebody that's a professional facilitator or modeler, somebody who really knows what they're doing, and just have the ability to say, well, stop it. We've done enough. We've got the idea. We can move on now. And what's interesting, if you particularly if you drop by the Agile modeling site, if you take a look at our writings on the value of documentation, the value of modeling, and the value of planning, you're actually better off to under-model or under-plan than you are to over-plan. Assuming, of course, you can go back and update your models or your plans. So less tends to be more when you're doing this upfront thinking, upfront modeling, upfront planning stuff. But you've got to do some. So nothing is a lot less than anything else. From Debbie, Loganathon. Okay, there's no way I pronounced that right. Anyway, sorry about that. How does inception be removed over a period as the new release is going to be the new feature? Yeah, good question. So if you take a look at the, I'll go back about 1,000 slides. Hang on. If you take a look at the goal diagram here, there's a lot going on during inception. You're putting the team together, you're coming to a vision, you're exploring the scope, you're doing your tech strategy, and so on. A lot of those activities just disappear, right? So if I keep the team together, I don't need to form the team again. So I'm done. My vision is, well, let's do whatever we can get done in the next 2 months. So visioning becomes a lot simpler, particularly if you've got a product management activity going on. Exploring the initial scope. Well, more than likely, we didn't get all the requirements done. We might do a little more requirements replenishment session at this point in time. So maybe we spend half a day or so doing some more requirements modeling to sort of feed the backlog or feed the option pool. But for the most part, we don't. We've probably got a lot of requirements that are still on the product backlog or still in the option pool we haven't got to yet. So not a lot of need to do more requirements modeling when we're already got a lot to do, and so on. So a lot of stuff just sort of naturally disappear. Will it completely disappear? Maybe not. Or what'll happen? What generally happens is it just turns into modeling replenishment sessions or planning sessions. But for the most part, yeah, inception just naturally disappears by itself. From Lily Lee. What are the typical sizes of small, medium, and large teams? There's no definition. So the way we define it, and then take it for what it is small teams are up to 10-ish type people. Medium-sized teams are 10 to 15, 10 to 25 or 10 to 30, and then large teams are 25 to and more. So the idea here is that it depends on what you're into, or what your experiences are. So the best definition of a large team that I ever heard was actually from Larry Constantine about 20 years ago, and he defines a large team as 20% bigger than anything you've succeeded at so far. So if you've only ever pulled off a team of 10 people, then boosting that up to 12 or 13 people is probably going to seem pretty large to you, and you'll take time to figure it out, and then so on. But I've worked with people that have succeeded very well with programs of 250, 300 people. So they think now they think a 500-person program is large, but they would think that a 50-person program would be an insult to their professionalism. It's too small for them to even bother with, because that's just they're used to large team stuff, and that's what they do. So it really depends. It's interesting. So one of the things that we do, I don't have the slides in this deck, But one of the things that we do is we regularly run surveys. And what we found, one of the surveys we ran in November was around scaling factors. So, how big are teams and how geographically distributed they are and so on. And what we found was that roughly half of Agile teams are 10 people or less. So this 7 plus or minus 2 stuff doesn't really seem to hold. Less than half of teams are in that range. So, and what we're seeing is it's fairly common. Well, roughly half of teams are bigger than 10. So we need to accept that and realize that different teams are going to be organized in different ways based on size, for other reasons as well, but certainly based on size. That's going to motivate changes as well. Okay, so anyways, I guess we're at the end of the hour. Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy day. I hope that this has been a good use of your time, and have a great day. And like I said, please, if you get a chance, drop by disciplinedagileconsortium.org. There's a lot of great material there, great videos, some white papers, some posters, a lot of good stuff that you can get into. So anyways, so thank you very much, and have a great day.